Then there's another drive here. This drive model is the Rat Fuzz. Let's go here to the preset. Rat Distortion, or I should say Rat Distortion. I use these two drives in series. I turn this one on for the beginning intro, I'll explain why later, for the solo, and for the outro. I do those two in series, okay? So I do a preset change where I turn this on. What that's going to do is give you a lot more gain, and it's going to give you this really full tone that you hear, especially in the outro. This is the key, to have the OD2 driving into the Rat. I'm not saying this is what Edge does, but this is what I did in order to model and try to get that tone closely. Edge is known to use 2 amps, I think, on this song. I'm not 100% sure, so he might bring in another amp that has a separate distortion going through it and boost his tone and change his tone that way. I didn't elect to use a second amp. I just used 1 amp model throughout the entire song, but I used this drive to change the tone. So you've got the Rat, you got drive at 2.4, tone at 4.65, level at 5, mix, same thing. Okay, let's go to page 2. This is important again. Notice the low cut is at 76, it's a little different. The high cut's at 3090. Clip type was hard. I did a little more fuzzier. You can actually change the distortion derive sound not only in page 1 with the type, Rat and BB Pre we used in the other one, but you can also then subtly change the drive tone with the clip type. Here there's hard, soft, there's silicon diode, there's 5 or 6, 7 different types. So when you're modeling a pedal, be sure to try these different clip types. It works really well. So next is the slew limit. I did the same. I usually keep these about the same. I don't find they make a huge difference in tone. It's very, very subtle. And then the EQ, I think I left pretty much flat. Bass, I took off a little. Mid, 0. The mid frequency is about the same, but 680. And the treble 0. So that's, these two are very key to the song. I have an FX loop here. It goes to my Triad, Psionic Audio Triad boost pedal. It's not really boosting the tone, it's just there for a little bit of color. It does more with a real amp than it does with the XFX. You do not need this in here. It won't make a big difference. But I keep it in pretty much all my presets because it's in the loop, and it's what I use the FX loop for. So I don't consider that to be, especially for this song. For the cleaner songs it might make a little more difference, but for this song, which has a lot of drive from these two effects, this isn't going to make a really big deal at all. So go right into the amp model. This is my latest global amp model for U2. Top boost, which is the AC30, 3.5 on the drive, bass at 4.8, mid at 6.3, a little more mids. I find that the Fractal Audio amp model is just too thin, too trebly, so I boost the mids there. And then the treble I bring down 4.25. Now there's some more important parameters here for my new amp model. The presence I take off a little bit, minus 165. Depth and these others I put almost halfway, 433. They don't make a huge difference in tones, it's very subtle. So I balance it out about there, 433 for damping. Sag, this is part of the power amp modeling, 4.33. Master volume, very important for the AC3 model. Bring that up. I use 8.9. You want to have that to model as much of the tone and compression as possible. You want this to model the loudness of the amp. It seems to do a lot better when you do that. And then, since you're blasting the master volume so high, you need to bring the level down, minus 7, to balance out the levels and not clip anything. So that's why that's in there. Advanced tab, I've spent a lot of time with this on this preset. What I did was I compared my AC30, my actual amp. It's a 1964 TB, so it's very similar to Edge's. I played through that amp, and then I played through the Axe, and I tried to come as close as possible to the tone, and I made changes throughout these. So the warmth and the thump don't make a huge difference. Those are pretty low values. The low and high cut frequencies seem to do, especially the low cut, make a lot of difference. So you'll see here I've got 659 and on the high 7180. So I cut off the highs a little bit more and the lows a little bit to get into the more mid-range frequency range. The bright cap is very important. I use 185 now. That seems to be in a good range. It's not too bright, it's not too low. That will really affect your treble tone a lot. So this is my kind of standard setting, and depending on if I want a certain type of treble, I'll go to this parameter and change it from preset to preset just a little bit. Tone stack type passive, I'm still learning about that. I can't explain that real well. Tone stack frequency 465, tone location post, presence frequency 3010. What I do on each of these is I go full left and full right to see how they sound, and then depending on what I hear listening to my AC30, I adjust it accordingly and see what I like best. Now certainly if you change one parameter, it might one way, it might then have an effect on the other parameters. So obviously the combinations are infinite and you can spend a lot of time tweaking these, which I did. But it's infinite, and you can probably get the same tone using different combinations of these parameters. This I found very important, the power tube bias. Make sure that's up. I found it was a little too low. When you pull this up, it seems to give the amp model more headroom, more clarity. I just liked it better. I didn't like to go all the way to 1. I think it goes between 0 and 1, but I did up it here to 890, and I think it sounded much better. So you might want to take a look at that if you have an XFX. The B plus capacitance I think I left alone. The transformer LF low cut and high cut frequency I changed a little bit, 206, 10,000. They don't seem to make as much of a difference. Not the transformer, but the low cut frequency, high cut frequency, I think these are preamp, I'm not sure. Those seem to have more of an effect than the transformer LF and HF. But you should just tweak those both ways, left and right, and you can see the difference. LF resonance, I think I left pretty close to the model. For HF resonance, don't put this up too high. You put this up too high, I didn't like it at all. It should be, and I think when you turn to the top boost model, it has this at 3, 4, or 5, and it's just much too high, so I bring this down. I thought that had a lot to do with the tone. And the rest I leave pretty much the same. So those are really important parameters. The mix, the level, that's the same level, by the way, that you find here. Okay, minus 7 dB, that's the same as in the mix page here. They change together. Balance, bypass mode is through. So that's the entire amp model. And that's my core U2 amp model. And again, I just tweak it a little bit. Now, I find that the amp model still doesn't have enough mids. When I was playing around with all the parameters, I still couldn't get it to be close enough to my AC30. So what I do between the amp and the cap model is I put in a graphic equalizer. And it's very subtle. Here are my parameters. Minus 1, minus 0.5, 1, 1.5, 1, 1.5, 0.5, minus 1, minus 2. I just felt that for me, for my guitars, trying to listen to my amp, it needed a little more mid. So this is what my graphic equalizer does. It just gives the amp model a little more mid, and I'll show you how the sound is a little bit different when I plug the guitar in later. Cab model, I use stereo. I've got the Brit cab, 57 Dyna. I got the Brit now in both sides, I guess, and the same, even though they're in stereo, they're the same on each side for this one. I think I used to have a blue and the Brit, now I'm going just with the Brit. I seem to like the tone a little better. Okay, and then we've got page 3, which is the levels are the same. The panning is whatever was in here. They're panned a little bit, but they're the same, so you're not going to hear the difference. And I do turn the drive up here a little bit to 3 on each of these. Give it a little bit of grit. Very subtle. It's another area on the XFX where you can change the grit.
Knock it off.